But please take this moment to welcome Dr. Rubin Pillay.
Good morning. How are we doing this morning? Great. Thank you very much to Ross and Mark. It's my first time here, and I can say I'm actually blown away by the attendance and, more importantly, by the venue. I've never had to compete with belugas before, but stay focused. I'm up here. So what I want to do is spend the next 20 minutes taking you on a very, very fast journey into the future of healthcare. And essentially what I want to do is cover three major trends that are going to dramatically disrupt your very notion of health and healthcare. And hopefully the take-home point is we've never been at a better time in humankind to address the ills that have befallen healthcare in the past. We are uniquely positioned, thank God to the technologies that we have access to for the very first time move towards ubiquitous access and $0 health care. And you heard me correctly. $0 health care is a reality of the future. Well, Mark introduced me as a futurist, and people often ask me, well, what's a futurist? Well, one of the things we do is we monitor the technological trajectories and figure out the applications in healthcare and try and figure out how they're going to transform the way we perceive patients, the way we perceive providers, and I guess you can argue, most importantly, the way we perceive the way healthcare is paid for. So today's talk is titled Healthcare 3.0, how technology is driving the transition to prosumerist platforms and outsurance. Essentially, this is a journey of a transition from a Flintstone-based approach to healthcare to the Jetsons. For too long, we've operated, and even today you will argue that we operate healthcare and manage healthcare as if we're still in the Flintstone era, when really we have all of the technologies to propel us into a Jetson era of healthcare. Just take a look at this. 2 weeks ago, Apple releases its iPhone iWatch Series 4, which comes with a FDA-approved EKG and a gyrometer to detect falls. Not only does it detect falls, it actually triggers a call when you do fall. Apparently, it also tells the time. Not to be outdone, Microsoft has just patented a pair of glasses that's able to monitor your blood pressure. My favorite, out of the university, Monash University in the USA, a radar system to detect blood pressure. So you can imagine if I had that system up here, the range of red, orange, and bleeps would go in and would alert us to those of you whose blood pressure is borderline. So, you guys hang around the sick bay, the rest you're fine. So that's the trend that technology is taking. We're also seeing a convergence of technologies like 3D printing and stem cell technology. For the very first time, scientists at Newcastle University are able to 3D print corneas. Incidentally, there's a shortage of 15 million corneas around the world, and using this technology, we're able to print one every 6 minutes. Not only is this happening in corneas, it's happening in kidneys, hearts, and a range of organs as well. So dramatically changing the way we manage healthcare. Exponential advances in robotics is now making it for the very first time possible for people who have been paraplegic to walk again. Research out of Boston Dynamics and products out of a company like Exobionics is showing how we can enable those previously paralyzed to walk. Well, we're not stuck in robotics. We're moving on. It's now theoretically possible. Work just been conducted at King's College in London. Using genetic engineering, we're now able to repair spinal cord injuries. Okay, so very soon, Exobionics, a robotic-driven enabler, will be replaced by gene therapy, enabling previously paralyzed to walk as well. This is really cool. For those of you who remember the flatworm at school in your biology classes, we always wondered how these flatworms were able to reproduce themselves and regrow. Well, we have just identified the mechanism to do that, and the logical question that the futurist will ask, is it conceivable that we could actually replicate this in humans? to actually regrow limbs and organs using the technology. So I urge you to watch that space. Lots of advances in integrating robotics with mankind. Tokyo Institute of Technology successfully integrated muscle into a robot and actually had the functionality that they were looking for. So the advent of biohybrids or transhumanism is not just theoretical. It's really happening, it's in the lab, and I think this would redefine the very definition of what human is to be. On the therapeutic space, there are dramatic advances in moving away from chemotherapy, or from chemical therapy, pharmaceuticals, to stuff like using digital therapy. Advances in virtual reality and augmented reality are being made, with significant empirical data suggesting that AR and VR is already working far better for the treatment of pain and opioid dependency than the traditional medication that we used. My favorite, baby Eliana, now a year old, was doomed to death at conception because she was unfortunate to inherit the genes from both mom and dad that would have given her a disease called thalassemia major, which of course is fatal. But a year ago, brave scientists at UCSF conducted the world's first stem cell transplant, and baby Eliana is free of thalassemia major, and the world is now introduced to an era where we can actually prevent the kids being born with otherwise fatal illnesses as well. You're probably aware that significant advances have been made in sensor technology. This is one of my favorites, a sensor that is able to detect what you eat and drink, and yes, alcohol is included as well. So you can imagine the days of saying to your wife that you just stopped off to have one with the boys is over, because she'll be actually, okay. So these are some significant advances, I think. Some of the technologies that are going to drive the future of healthcare. But as rosy as the future is, I think we can't get away from what the current situation is in healthcare. We're faced daily with, the news and flooded with information about issues that we have in cost and quality and access. And, there's some merit to that if you have a look at the data. But fortunately, as I said, for the very first time, we have the technology to attack the root causes of the problems. So what are the root causes of the issues that we face in healthcare? Well, one is the cognitive limitations of biases of providers, meaning that we've become so good at biomedical science that we've generated so much information that it's actually humanly impossible for providers to bring to bear that knowledge in care delivery. And that actually manifests itself in practice variation. You can see when we looked at Cleveland Clinic's second opinion business and assessed and evaluated the cases for which they provided second opinions, they had to change the diagnosis in about 11% of the cases and adjust their therapy in about 85% of the cases. When we asked 58 experts what they estimated the chance of a spontaneous rupture of a silicone breast implant was, this is the range of responses that we got. Okay? This, ladies and gentlemen, is the key driver of cost in healthcare, is the variation in practice, coming from our inability to leverage the vast amounts of knowledge that we generate. Okay? But thankfully, we have entered the era of artificial intelligence, and if you ask me, it's the single most important technology for the next few decades that's going to radically change the way we deliver care. Of course, I have on this slide IBM's Watson, but there are a host of AI technologies out there that are going to help dramatically reduce the practice variation. We already have significant data already showing that the leveraging of artificial intelligence is already improving clinical outcomes. Not only is it improving clinical outcomes, they're actually outdoing the human physicians. So much so that the Bible of Medicine, the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine, well, Old Testament and New Testament, the Lancet and the New England Medicine of Journal go one step further and say that machine learning in healthcare has reached a tipping point. Put another way, that it's going to be one of the key drivers of how the future of healthcare is going to pan out. They go further than me and make a prediction that artificial intelligence is going to make radiologists, dermatologists, and pathologists redundant. So if we have any of those in the room, well, time to rethink. Okay, there's a host of products out there, MIT's technology to detect breast cancer in females. We have There's several technologies out there in the field of radiology that actually improves the effectiveness and efficacy of diagnostic capability of physicians. So at the moment, it's used substantially across the space. This is an example of Watson's sieve, which just doesn't interpret the radiological image alone, but extracts information from the EHR as well, and uses that combination of EHR information and imaging to arrive at a diagnosis. That's really spectacular. There's also evidence, if you look at this slide, the top right-hand corner dated June 26, dermatologist level classification, suggesting that about 2 years ago, AI was on par with dermatologists. Okay? Take a look at the bottom slide, man against machine. AI is better than dermatologists at diagnosing skin cancer, dated 2018. So in a space of 2 years, AI has moved from being equal to being better. And we're seeing the trend across, whether it's radiology, whether it's dermatology, and there's another bit of empirical data from the JAMA suggesting that artificial intelligence is far superior to 11 pathologists put together. Okay? That's just an example. If you think this is a discussion of 2018, you're wrong. I pulled this article up from the Toledo Blade, February 1961. Look up at the right-hand corner there. The question, computer won't replace good doctor, MD says. So the discourse started way back in 1961. I love the response. Any doctor who can be replaced by a machine deserves to be replaced by a machine. It's very consoling. Okay, so not only is healthcare at risk of being disrupted by artificial intelligence, not only is healthcare being disrupted, we also see the legal fraternity. Incidentally, any profession is at risk of AI. This is an example of the legal fraternity. Ross, employed by one of the country's top legal companies, is already outperforming lawyers. And do me a favor, if you have an issue with a parking ticket, you think you overpaid for your flight ticket here, you want to get a quick, low-cost divorce, go to the website called donotpay.com, and you'll have an AI-driven free lawyer. Give it a shot. Okay, root cause number 2. Often regarded as one of the key issues that drive the problems that we face in healthcare is the fact that we don't have enough providers to cater to the growing demand for care because of population growth, real and relative. Okay, the American the Association of American Medical Colleges estimate that the shortage of physicians over the next few years rises to tens of thousands of people. I have an issue with that, but we can talk about that later. Okay? How does this manifest itself? Very simply, waiting times. Okay, if you want to see a family practitioner in Boston, be patient. It takes you 66 days. If you have a pressing chest pain and you're concerned that you have a cardiac condition, hang in there for a month in Washington. Okay? And if you're concerned about the lesion on your hand and whether it can be a melanoma and you happen to be in Boston, don't lose sleep. Okay? We'll get to you in 72 days. That's a reflection of the growing provider-patient gap that we see today. Okay, so you can choose to wait 72 days to see a dermatologist or step out of the room in 3 steps, download Skin Vision, aim, shoot, upload, and get an instant diagnosis. Total cost, 0. If you have concerns of zero-cost care delivery, do me a favor, download UDerm, and you'll get exactly the same thing for $29. Okay? Why wait 60 days to see a general practitioner? Step out the room, download what's called Babylon, a UK company, AI-driven primary care physician, already proven to be more efficacious than hundreds of GPs put together. Okay, and for a princely sum of $50 a month, you will get unlimited primary care delivered to you when you need it. Incidentally, Babylon rolled out the services in Rwanda, and with a switch of a button, made primary care services available to 2 million people that had previously no access to care delivery. Marginal cost to make that available to 2 million, zero. Of course, pressing 32 days to wait to see a cardiologist in Washington, well, you don't have to. Devices like Cardia, and actually I present Cardia now, it almost is like a dinosaur device. It was one of the first cardiac monitors that was on the market. I want to introduce you to Vive, out of Sanometal in Hungary, CE approved, FDA pending. Credit card-sized device that has the ability to predict your risk of stroke and sudden cardiac arrest. And why I love this is because stroke and sudden cardiac arrest are the key drivers of cardiac-related mortality in the world today. This device is able to predict your risk of actually falling prey to those diseases. Okay? This is really important. There's evidence coming out now that these point-of-care diagnostics are actually far superior than in-office assessments. Okay? So this is not just science fiction, it's actually science fiction that's better than reality. Root cause number 3 is what I call the information asymmetries between patients and providers. This has been the bane of our profession that's resulted in the market failure that we see today. But we know the internet has changed that and has democratized knowledge to an extent that we're now caught up in the conversation about consumerism. Well, our patients now have the knowledge and the information to engage in a constructive discourse about their care. They also have the information to compare providers, they have the information about their diseases, they have the information about the costs, so that they now move from being passive patients to informed consumers. Well, I want to warn you today, and you can bookmark this. One on the 27th of September, we have some witnesses on my right. Don't get caught in the consumerism trap. Okay? If you're in the healthcare space, you have to start talking now about what I'm calling prosumerism. Patients are not just empowered purchasers of care. They're now driven by the convergence of hardware, software, biomedical science, and communication technology, are elevated to empowered producers of care. For the very first time, patients now have the technology to be providers of their care. And when they provide their care, they're not consumers, they're prosumers. Put another way, they have evolved from being a customer to a competitor if you're in the medical and care delivery process. And that's powered by the technology.
Pulse is almost gone. How is he? Severe heart damage. Signs of congestion in both lungs. Evidence of massive circulatory.
Okay, for those of you fans of Star Trek, you're familiar with the tricorder, ladies and gentlemen. In about 3 months, go to Lowe's for $299, you'll be able to pick up that device. And you heard right, it's coming to Lowe's, has the ability to diagnose about 13 conditions and about 5 vital signs as well. And there's a host of products on the market now that are actually transforming mums and ordinary patients to being actually primary care providers. One example is Taito out of Israel. They have a fabulous product that actually guides mums through the medical examination, enables you to upload the information and use their AI engine to arrive at a diagnosis and treatment, or of course you have the option of defaulting to a teleconsultation. Okay? If you're like me and you like everything done while you're asleep, you may opt for Early Sense that does exactly the same thing. It's a device that you insert under the mattress, and when you get up, you have a full printout on your health status. Okay? This is another important example that reiterates the point I made earlier on, that all of these ambulatory and point-of-care diagnostics are actually proving to be far better predictors of health than actual in-house hospital visits. You probably realize, every one of you, I'm sure, in this room is somewhere along the line has had to see an optometrist. You know the waiting time, you know the cost associated with that. I want to introduce you to IQ, which is an example of the device that propels people to be providers of their own care. Okay? It actually is a smartphone-based device that allows you to do eye testing, and of course it gives you a prescription as well. For a princely sum of $29.95, you can become the neighborhood optometrist. Okay? And ladies and gentlemen, you obviously need to get the glasses that go with it. Don't get nervous. This is Indian rupees. You upload the prescription to John Jacobs, which I thought was a Hollywood name, but it turns out it's Bollywood. But for a sum of 3,500 rupees, the equivalent of $50, they'll mail you 2 pairs of spectacles. Okay? A classic example of what prosumerism is all about. The lab space is already being disrupted quite dramatically. We're now seeing smartphone-enabled diagnostic services. iCalQ is one of the leading companies in this space, suddenly bringing diagnostics to every single individual out there. You may ask, well, Rubin, what's the point of actually doing the diagnostic test if I aren't able to interpret it? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Go ahead, download doc.ai, and you have an AI-driven pathologist that will actually interpret that for you. Marginal cost to run these tests, ladies and gentlemen, $0. But we're moving away from using biomaterials for diagnostic. We're flooded with data today, and what we're seeing is the move towards data-driven diagnostics. Okay? You can see with this Cardia device that you were able to do potassium levels based on data and not based on blood tests. Embrace does exactly the same thing, leverages data to actually predict the onset of a convulsion if you're an epileptic patient. And you can imagine the power of this device if you are an epileptic patient. Being able to predict and know when you have an oncoming convulsion. There's another example of a device that diagnoses pregnancy using just data without the need for a blood test or a urine test. My 20 minutes are up, so I'm going to stop there. I hope I gave you a sense of some of the technologies and how that's going to reshape and redefine care delivery in the future. The very same technology is going to see us move from a bricks and mortar care approach to healthcare to an online and virtual care modality of care delivery. And finally, I'll leave you with this. The data deluge that we're faced with is for the very first time allowing us to base or to reward people who maintain health as opposed to getting them to pay in to mitigate against in-health. So we're seeing an emergence of payment modalities that are based on actually rewarding patients for good health as opposed to them paying in to mitigate against in-health. Okay? So with that, thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference.